All right, so welcome everyone. Thank you again for having me, even though I'm putting myself into conference. We're doing part 3 of our resident finance series on financial independence. All right, so let's consider the story of two different doctors, Dr. A, Dr. B, who are both 55 in the kind of mid to late stages of their career. Dr. A is currently coming into his fourth ED shift of the week with his ED looking like this, whereas Dr. B just finished her second shift this week, has no more shifts this week, and is currently at home sipping a coffee. Dr. A still has to work like this because he has expenses from a very expensive car, the biggest house, the most expensive jewelry. Whereas Dr. B is now working half-time, not because she needs the money, but because she still finds a lot of meaning in her job. Now, Dr. A is getting dangerously close to burning out, whereas Dr. B is sitting comfortable knowing that she can stop working whenever she wants to. She just doesn't want to yet. Now, I think the majority of us would like to be Dr. B rather than Dr. A. But the question becomes, how do we actually get from A to B? And that's the point of our talk today, financial independence, you decide. Now, is it a little strange that I am the one that's giving you guys this lecture, given that I am at the beginning of my career? Yes. But that's partially the point. Especially early in your career, you need a plan. You really can't just wish this into existence. You have to actually go and make it happen. You can't ignore this away. The good part, though, is that once you formulate a plan, a lot of it you can set it and forget it. So you don't have to really think about it too hard later, which is a big point of this whole lecture series. Now, there are two things that we need to delineate here, the retirement versus financial independence. So retirement is exactly what you think it is. It is when you stop working, whereas financial independence is when you no longer need to work to kind of fund the rest of your life. You can just choose to continue working. Now, if you want to do both, kind of get financially independent and retire, generally in your 40s, then this is what's called the FIRE lifestyle. But whether you want to retire early in your career in your 40s, or you want to keep working out of pure love of the game, like our guy, Dr. Gernsheimer, really it's the choice that you want to have here. You want to have the agency to make this decision yourself. Unfortunately, to make this decision, though, we do have to do a little bit of math. So let's take a look at this. So here we're going to talk about the FV equation. You go into any Excel function, go to financial, look up FV. You're then going to type in a few numbers here. So your rate of return, we're saying 5% here. The number of years you're going to be contributing, 30 years, how much you're going to be contributing to your retirement money you are starting off with, or how much debt you have. And then it spits out this number for you. 2.9 million is how much you would have at the end of this. So these are the numbers we input. Let's talk about how we actually got around and what these mean. So first one, 0.05%. This is your rate of return. This is how much you expect your money to grow every year as you have it kind of saved up. This is one of our major keys. Again, time in the market is the key here. So the longer you have your money in, the more rate of return that you can expect to have. Now, 5% is a pretty safe number here. You can historically get higher numbers than this, but it's really not up to you. It's up to kind of how the economy is working. So 5% is pretty kind of safe number here. Now, 30 is the number of years that you're going to be contributing to your retirement. So think about this as the number of attending years that you have. Uh, this is a ballpark number. If you plan on retiring in your 40s, then and you're starting at 30, then this is going to be a lower number. Whereas if you don't mind when you retire, then this may end up being like 40 years of working. So keep that in mind. 60,000 is how much you are actually saving per year of actual money. This is pre-tax money, which we'll talk about later. This is generally a percentage of your income. So when you multiply, say, 30,000 by 25%, it's $60,000. I think the math is right. And in this equation, just you need to know that this number is going to be a negative. This is unfortunately just how this equation works. And the last part is the 250,000. So this is what you already have. So unfortunately, if you have student loans, this is going to be a positive number in this equation. $250,000 in student loans kind of puts you behind in the beginning. So keep that in mind. If you actually have no student loans and you have money saved up, first off, congratulations. You are, much stronger than me. That number is going to be a negative in this equation. And when you put all this together, you're saying that you're going to be working 30 years, you're going to be contributing $60,000 per year, you're going to get a rate of return of 5%. and you started with $250,000 in debt, this is how much money you're going to end up when you retire. $2.9 million. Pretty good. This is going to be your nest egg that you're going to live off of. Now, what does that actually mean though for when I retire? How much money am I going to see per year? That is where we come into this equation. If you multiply that number by 4%, it gives you $116,000 to live off of for 30 years of your life in retirement, which is pretty good. If you don't have a car that you're paying or you don't have a mortgage that you're paying anymore, you probably don't need this much money to live off of. But this is kind of a general how to ballpark how much you're going to need. Now, where do we get the 4% number from? This is a general rule that if you multiply your nest egg by 4%, then it should last you about 30 years in retirement before you run out. And 30 years seems to be a pretty accurate number in terms of like when you retire to when you die. If you plan on retiring in your 40s, then that number is going to be a lot longer. So this 4% rule doesn't apply to you. You probably need to save more or withdraw less, which kind of brings us to our first rule here. Wealth isn't how much you make, wealth is how much you keep of what you make, which is the major key here. In order to build your nest egg, you have to contribute to it. So for instance, a physician who makes a lot of money per year, but spends most of that money on expensive car, the biggest house, most expensive jewelry, like Dr. A in the beginning, but who really doesn't put that much money towards his retirement, uh, is not accumulating wealth. They may make a lot of money per year, but they're not setting themselves up well to have a comfortable retirement. Now, before going forward, I don't want to give off the impression that, we should be money hungry, that, our life should be in pursuit of saving as much money as possible. That's not the point here, because no amount of money can give you purpose, and it's very clearly one of the major causes of all of our problems in the world. But smart savings can help us get from point A to point B. So at this point, I probably don't need to convince you to save for your retirement. But the question is, how much money of my money do I need to save per year? What percentage? Now, a very safe number is around 20%. Uh, it's a lot lower for your average person, whereas us, with our future career earnings as well as lifestyle creep, 20% is a pretty reasonable number here. Now, if you multiply 20% by, let's say you're making $300,000 living in, Brooklyn, that means that you're going to be saving $60,000 per year. Now, if you plot that on a graph, you get linear growth over years based on how much you're contributing. Having said that, if this is all that, if this was all of the money you saved, then you would find that this nest egg here, so this graph is your 2.9 million. The yellow is the amount that you are actually contributing for those 30 years. So if you only had that money to go off of, you would have $48,000 a year to live off of, which is not enough money for most of us in retirement. So what I'm trying to get at is, where does the rest of this money come from? How do we turn our linear graph that we just talked about into an exponential graph? So we're going to just bring it back. Compounding interest is how this is going to happen. This is how your money that you're putting in grows over the years, which again reminds us that time in the market is king. The longer that you're in the market, the more compounding has to work, the more your linear becomes that exponential graph. So for those of you that want to have the FIRE lifestyle and retire in your 40s, what does this actually look like? How much would I need to save? So Dr. Jim Dolly, the creator of White Coater Investor, actually helps us out here. He made a chart that I recreated here that essentially tells you how many years it would take for you to reach a $2.5 million nest egg, making $250,000 a year. So as you can see here, they are assuming a rate of return of 4% or 6%. As we said, the kind of safe number is around 5%, but this gives you kind of a ballpark estimate. And you can see that for most of us, we're going to be starting our savings in our 30s. Adding another, 27 to 31 years on top of that is going to put us retiring in like our late 50s or 60s. So if you want to do the FIRE lifestyle and actually retire earlier, after 20 years, 18 years, your savings rate has to be a lot higher. Has to be in the 35, 40, even 50% range if this is something that you really want to do. Which brings us to our point here. In order to actually do the FIRE lifestyle, you need to save more than you probably thought. And this explains why Dr. A, who would love to cut back on his working time but only contributed 5% a year, has to continue working this hard. Whereas Dr. B, who's been saving 35% consistently for a career, can cut back without sacrificing really anything. So what does this mean for us today as residents? How much of our actual paycheck can we reasonably put towards our retirement? So again, as we talked about for an attending, a safe number is, somewhere in the 20 to 40% range. That's just not feasible for a resident. There's no way we can contribute that much right now. So what are the numbers for us? For downstate, it is 4%, and for county, it is 7.5%. We're going to talk about why. So for downstate, 4% is because you want to get the match. Now, if you don't know what the match is essentially when your pay source incentivizes you to contribute to your own retirement by agreeing that for every dollar that you put in, they will match your contributions up to a point, up to 4% of your pre-tax income. And downstate even does one better, and they double your contribution. So by you putting in 4%, downstate agrees to put in 8% for a total of 12%. That is free money, okay? I need people to realize that if you are not doing this, you are losing out on free money. So for the love of God, please do this. So 4%. For county, we don't have a match here, but we do have something called the FICA waiver. Now, what the FICA waiver, the FICA tax is essentially Social Security and Medicare. We all pay this on our pay stub, but what Kings County offers is to incentivize you to contribute to your retirement. If you put in at least 7.5%, they waive your FICA tax. So that's how you get the FICA waiver. And that's really the goal here for county, is just to get this. So to reiterate, for county, it's 7.5%. For downstate, it is 4%. So to bring it all back, start building now. Though we are just at the beginning of our career, the habits we build now can really determine when we hit financial independence. The money we're actually contributing is pretty small compared to what we're going to be needing to take out later, but it's really the habits that we are building that are huge. Getting started on these habits earlier makes it easier for you to kind of begin making these heavy hitter contributions when you're making attending salary. Because again, ultimately, we want to be the ones making the decision on when we want to retire. You don't want that decision made for you. So in summary, you need a plan. You can't wish this plan into existence. You have to get comfortable with coming up with this plan yourself. It's not what you make, but what you keep of what you make. You can have the highest salary in the world, but if you don't save a good portion of it, you won't be living like that when you retire. And lastly, the habits start now. Though the contributions are small right now, the habits we build today are worth so much more.